of the board.
The West
It is
Basin.
June 6th.
All right.
It is June 16th. Are we ready or?
Yes, just give us one more minute. We're going to mute somebody. I think we're ready. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome again to the West Basin Municipal Water District Water Policy and Legislation Committee and special meeting of the Board of Directors for June 16th, 2025. It is now 1:01. I'm calling this meeting to order. Mr. General Manager, do we have a quorum, please?
I'll read roll call. Director Don Deere. Here. Chairwoman Gloria Gray.
Here.
Director Scott Houston. Director Tommy Favai. Director Desi Alvarez. Madam Chair, since a quorum of the committee and the board are not present within the jurisdictional boundary of the district, which is a requirement of the Brown Act, this meeting will move forward as an informational meeting only and no action will be taken.
Okay, which board members are available or here?
It's two for the committee, however, one of them is outside the jurisdictional boundary of our, yes. I apologize for that, Madam Chair. It's just you and Director Don Deere.
Thank you very much. All right. Are there any public comments?
Madam Chair, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting has been held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to make public comment, please indicate so now by raising your virtual hand. And Madam Chair, I do not see any requests.
All right, thank you. Item 4, presentations. Are there any presentations?
There are no presentations today.
Thank you. Item 5, action calendar. Mr. General Manager, please introduce the action calendar. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have 2 items that were included on the action calendar. It's important to note that these items will be heard today as information only, though we are seeking feedback from those directors that are present. So with that, item 5A is adopt support positions on SB 454 by Senator McInerney and Senate Bill 682 by Senator Allen. And for this presentation, we have Matt Vey, Manager of Water Policy and Resources Development.
Thank you, EJ, and good afternoon, Chairwoman Gray and Director Deere. This item begins on page 3 of the agenda packet, and I'll be covering some slides as part of my presentation, which begin on page 29 of the packet. We also have attached text for each of those bills within the packet. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So PFAS, I think we're all pretty familiar with what PFAS is. It's a pretty broad class of man-made chemicals that do not degrade easily, that can accumulate in our bodies, in products that we consume. It's becoming more and more of an issue throughout the United States, throughout the world. And the burden, responsibility often to address PFAS and its impacts often falls on municipal drinking water and wastewater systems that have to treat that PFAS. If you'll recall, a couple of years ago, there was a major class action lawsuit, and settlements were approved by the U.S. District Court for a settlement of at least $11.4 billion. So there's a lot of money at stake here. And one of the things that we've talked about over the years is we want to see that the polluters pay principle in effect to the maximum extent possible. That our federal and state government support that type of policy because it removes that burden from public agencies who are passive receivers of PFAS, and so they really shouldn't be held liable for the cost of cleaning up that. That should fall on the manufacturers or the polluters. So next slide, please. So the first bill I'll cover here is Senate Bill 454 by Senator Jerry McInerney. This bill was introduced on February 19th, and it is sponsored by the California League of Cities and Aqua. This bill would create the PFAS mitigation fund within the state treasury. And it would authorize the State Water Resources Control Board to use the fund to cover or reduce costs associated with treating PFAS in water sources. Also, it authorizes the State Water Resources Control Board to seek out and to accept non-state, federal, and other types of funds to deposit into the PFAS mitigation fund. There's also hope that implementation of Prop 4 funding could provide some level of future funding to carry out the provisions of the PFAS mitigation fund in the future. And then based on a recent amendment, it's important to note that the bill would not become operative or go into full effect until there's an appropriation by the legislature. So for instance, the legislature could pass the bill, the governor could sign it, but the PFAS mitigation fund aspects of the bill will not go into effect until the legislature takes the appropriation action. I also want to note that the bill does account for recycled water, stating that the program may be used to cover the costs for water suppliers of treating recycled water in addition to drinking water and wastewater. So that's a good thing that recycled water is noted and covered. Next slide. Agencies in support of this bill include Metropolitan Water District, CMUA, Aqua, California Special Districts Association, AWWA, and there's no opposition on file for this bill. It passed the Senate floor on a 37-0 vote on May 28th, and it previously passed unanimously out of the Senate policy committees that it went before. It's currently in the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee and is actually set for a hearing tomorrow. Next slide, please. The second bill that I'll touch on here is Senate Bill 682, introduced by Senator Ben Allen, who you're very familiar with. West Basin delegation member. It was introduced back in February. While the previous bill offers a solution for when PFAS is already in a system and causing impacts, this bill attempts to mitigate PFAS contamination or pollution by addressing the source of those chemicals. This bill is sponsored by the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, Clean Water Action, Environmental Working Group, Natural Resources Defense Council. And starting in 2027, this bill would prohibit a person from distributing, selling, or offering for sale covered products that contain intentionally added PFAS. That prohibition would be phased in over about a 13-year period based on different product categories from 2027 to 2035 and then eventually to 2040. The bill would include an exemption process for products with unavoidable uses of PFAS, and it would also require manufacturers of products that are regulated by the bill to provide a certificate of compliance to the state upon request. Next slide. Agencies in support of SB 682 include Aqua, California Association of Sanitation Agencies, various water agencies, sanitation districts, environmental organizations, water replenishment district, and water reuse. Bill does face some opposition by manufacturers, business, industry, chambers of commerce, as you would expect, because it does impact some of these entities. It passed the Senate floor on a 28-7 vote on June 3rd, and it previously passed Senate Policy and Fiscal Committees on majority votes. It's currently in the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee. However, no hearing date has been set as of yet, but it should be heard relatively soon. Next slide. Okay, so taking the support position on these bills does align with West Basin's legislative and regulatory priority number 11, which is to ensure a polluters pay principle. It also reaffirms the position of water and wastewater industry as a passive receivers, since they do not produce or manufacture PFAS and therefore should not be held liable for any of the associated costs. It would also provide an opportunity to put together a funding source that could help mitigate costs in the future. The American Water Works Association estimates the price tag of at least $37 billion in upfront costs to treat PFAS and an additional $650 million annually to meet new PFAS MCL regulations. So it does have significant impact on the industry. West Basin has also long advocated for water recycling to be included with water and wastewater agencies when it comes to this issue. So we're pleased to see that recycled water has been included in these bills. Next slide. So just to wrap this up, based on the above information that I presented, staff is recommending that this committee and eventually the board to adopt support positions on both SB 454 and SB 682. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Matt. Director Deere, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
And neither do I. You've been very thorough, Matt. So can we move it forward, Director Deere, with a recommendation from the committee?
Yes,
We
that's,
don't- We do that?
Yes, Madam Chair, because this is an information item only, what we'll do is we'll work with our admin department and we will add this to the board meetings action calendar for the board to deliberate on.
Right, because Director Houston's not here. He's
Right.
a member. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Director Deere, for your comments. So we will go to the next item, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, this item is item 5B, is to approve a 2025 annual water supply and demand assessment. For this presentation, again, we have Matt Bay, our Manager of Water Policy and Resources Development. This item does begin on packet page 37.
Great. Thank you, EJ. So I'll be covering some slides that were posted to the other section of the packet online. These were also provided to the directors. And then I did want to mention that joining me today as part of this presentation is Spencer Waterman, and he's a water resources planner with Water Systems Consulting, who conducted the analysis for us, put together the charts and the different kind of required materials that will be required to submit to the state later this month. And he'll be presenting some of the findings to you today as well. Next slide, please. So just to provide a quick overview, I think this is our third or fourth iteration of this process, the annual water supply demand assessment. In 2018, as part of the water conservation kind of framework legislation that was enacted, it requires new annual water supply demand assessment requirements in California. And then also as part of the 2020 urban water management plan process, a new aspect of that was that water agencies were required to implement water shortage contingency plans, which West Basin has done. And that specifies procedures for conducting annual water supply demand assessments. So as part of this, again, it's an annual requirement. We have to submit these annual water shortage assessment reports to California Department of Water Resources by July 1st of each year, which we've done every year for the last few years. And really the main thing that this process requires us to do is to kind of ask two key questions. One, does a shortage condition exist in the following fiscal year? Which spoiler alert, no, there's no shortage that we expect to see next year. But if there were a shortage for the following fiscal year, what are the different actions and things that the agency will be doing to address that shortage? And then, of course, board and customer agency feedback is critical to this process. Also working with Metropolitan Water District, it's something that we do each and every year, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in the next slide. So the regional coordination, as I mentioned, so in late April, there was an informational meeting held by California Department of Water Resources, which staff attended that. And during that, they kind of just provided an update and review of the annual water supply demand assessment procedures. Anything that was new, for this coming year, they shared updates on any improvements that were made to the system. One thing to note is that there were no changes to the actual requirements themselves. So we're pretty much reporting the same thing that we have at least the last year or two. And then just to note that by September 30th, DWR will be posting an annual summary report of the annual water supply demand assessment. All of these get posted publicly online, and we're able to access them for all of the past years that we've done that. So, but this will kind of summarize what those reports look like for this year. So it's something that we'll be looking at when it comes out. And then on May 5th, we also participated in Metropolitan Water District's annual water supply demand assessment coordination meeting. Again, there's not a whole lot of change this year. Metropolitan has record storage, as you've been informed by Tammy and myself over the last few months, if not year. And so kind of the bottom line is that Metropolitan is assuring all of its member agency that it expects to meet all imported water demands in FY 2026. So from July 1st of this year to June 30th of next year, we're in good shape. No shortages, nothing to worry about. And then finally, in June of this year, we've submitted our preliminary or initial demand assessment to both Metropolitan Water District for their planning purposes, and then also to all of our customer agencies, asking for any feedback they might have on this year's report. We don't have anything yet to report back on that, but if we do get any feedback, that's something that we could share before the board meeting. And then for us, again, bottom line, based on what Metropolitan has assured us of, West Basin is able to express to its customer agencies that we're able to meet all imported water demands for fiscal year 2026. And so to get into a little more of the details, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Spencer, who will take the next several slides.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So in order to project imported demand for the coming fiscal year, we looked at historical trends since fiscal year 2018. We also looked at urban water management plan projections, as well as fiscal year 26 budget projections. And based on review of that data, we expect that imported demands will be about 19% lower than the long-term average. And really the lower demand is expected due to lower customer agency demands, and then also increased recycled water barrier use instead of imported use. Next slide, please. Similar to imported water, we also looked at historic use, the UWMP projections, as well as budget projections. And based on that review, we expect that recycled water will be, well, excuse me, retail recycled water will be, I'm sorry, was there a question?
No, I don't
Okay,
think there was a question. Sorry.
Okay, I thought I heard somebody asking a question. Sorry.
Sorry.
So yeah, we expect that retail recycled water will be lower than the historical average, but recycled water for replenishment water will be increased for a total recycled water use increase of about 16%. And as I mentioned, that increased replenishment is expected, and mainly that's due to improved production capacity and expanded barrier production for next year. Next slide, please. All right, so after we looked at these projections, we pulled them into the state's template tables, and then we distributed them on a monthly time step based on historic trends. So in table 2 in the top left, you'll see what's called unconstrained demand, as the state puts it. They require you to project demand as if no conservation impacts were in effect. And thus table 2 reflects demands that are about 10% higher than supplies in table 3. However, realistically, we expect that demands will be about 10% lower than that, assuming continued impacts from conservation actions, which are shown in the following slides. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this table 4 shows higher potable demands than expected that will realistically reduce by about 10%, and that's due to the savings that are expected, shown in the row that's highlighted in yellow, that's labeled as benefits from WSCP. So ultimately, we expect that supply will meet demand. We also expect that non-potable supplies are equal to demand. Next slide, please. Lastly, table 5 shows that the water shortage contingency plan, shortage level 3 actions that have been in effect since about 2021 will continue to prevent demands from rebounding to historic high levels. Based on information, as Matt mentioned, Metropolitan Water District provided, we don't expect any supply reductions from Metropolitan, and we don't really expect any drastic conservation beyond what is already in place. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt.
All right, thank you, Spencer. So I'll just hit kind of the next steps as part of this process. So today, you know, if any of the committee members have any feedback for us, we're happy to receive that and incorporate that. We'll also still kind of waiting to hear back from our customer agencies if they have any feedback for us about this year's draft. Any feedback we receive today, you know, over the next week or even at the board meeting, when that's held, we can incorporate into the final draft of the report as needed. But otherwise, we're hoping that the board adoption of this will take place on June 23rd at the regular board meeting. And then that would give us a week in which to submit the annual shortage report to California Department of Water Resources by their July 1st deadline. So with that, I'll just kind of, no, we're not taking an action today, but I'll just read the recommendation, which would be to approve the district's 2025 annual water supply demand assessment and to authorize staff to submit the annual water shortage assessment report to California Department of Water Resources by July 1st, 2025. And with that, Spencer and myself are both available for any questions.
Well, thank you, Matt and Spence, for the presentation. Director Deirdre, do you have any input or comments right now?
Oh, I don't, thank you.
Yes. And EJ, this item will be on the board agenda for the board to have a full opportunity to comment on it, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you then. So we'll move on to item 6, information calendar.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is item 6A. It's our monthly state and federal legislative update. And for the presentation, we do have Matt Bay, our Manager of Water Policy and Resource Development.
Thank you, EJ. This item begins on page 40 of the agenda packet. And the presentation slides were provided to directors and are also posted in the other section of the agenda packet. Go ahead and move up a couple slides there. Great. Thank you, Desiree. So I'll be taking the state legislative update first. And so just to provide an update on the state legislative session where it stands, kind of getting on our way to the summer break in another month or so from now. But we're now at the point where all proposed legislation this year has had to pass out of the original house. So it's moved on to the second house, or if not, it might have died. And we also have the fiscal committee deadline on May 23rd. That's where both houses take up any bills with fiscal impacts. If they're too costly, they could get held. Bills. So on the assembly side, there was nearly 700 bills that were kind of considered under that fiscal deadline. About 2/3 of them passed out. 1/3 of them were held, with 14 of those being now 2-year bills, which means they could be heard again in January of next year. And then on the Senate side, a little fewer bills, 432, about 70% passed out, 30% held, and 11 of those are now 2-year bills. The next upcoming kind of major deadline is the second House Policy Committee deadline, which means that all bills have about a month to get heard by one or more of the policy committees where they've been referred to before they have to move on to the fiscal committees. All right, next slide, please. Okay, just wanted to talk a little bit about the Delta Conveyance Project, the budget trailer bill. As you likely know, Governor Newsom has been trying very hard to move the Delta Conveyance Project forward. And his kind of mechanism for doing that has been to, support a budget trailer bill, to introduce budget trailer bill language, which would essentially streamline the permitting and legal processes for the Delta Conveyance Project. And just to note that, West Basin has supported this effort to streamline the permitting process for the DCP. But we've been part of a very large kind of coalition of water industry, of state water contractors, labor, business groups, and others who have coordinated together to support that budget trailer bill initiative. We signed on to a letter last month with hundreds of other organizations in support of that. And then more recently, we've been working very hard with our legislators, our state legislators, to put together a support letter that would go out in support of this trailer bill. I can say that West Basin was very well represented on that letter. I believe that we had 5 or 6 of our delegation that ended up signing on to it, with others that are likely to provide a yes vote, if and when that comes up. So I do want to say just a huge thank you to our delegation. Also, I know some of our directors have been talking about this, both at our Sacramento trip, but also more recently with folks that they know and work with. So thank you to the directors. And then really also our Sacramento lobbyist NPA, who did a tremendous job utilizing the relationships that they have in Sacramento to get many of our representatives to sign on to that letter. They've just done a great job coordinating. There was an advocacy day that was held last week on June 11th, more than 40 meetings. Jamie Miner, one of our lobbyists, was leading one of those groups and made a lot of good progress, had good conversations. So again, just want to recognize the team effort on this throughout this process. Now I can also say that the trailer bill did not get included in the proposed budget. That was not something that the legislature felt comfortable doing. That's always an issue that they talk about in having a policy type of issue being involved in the budget process. So that kind of reared its head, prevented it from going forward right now. So now, this trailer bill must be taken up separately, and they will have until the end of the legislative session to do so. They could do it in near term, or it can be, after the budget passes. They can handle it separately. So there's a lot of different ways that they can go about it, but they do have, about 3 months to get it done if they want to see that get done this year. All right, next slide. Just an update on the state budget. So the legislature is set to pass the 2-way budget deal, so both the Assembly and the Senate. As I mentioned, it does defer action on the governor's Delta Conveyance Project budget trailer bill, rejects it as part of the budget process. So that'll happen separately if it does happen. They could choose not to take it up again this year as well. That is certainly a possibility. In addition to the state budget, there's $13 billion in reserves that it maintains, including $11 billion as part of the rainy day fund. The budget is, the budget to go to the governor's desk was yesterday. So, and then he must eventually sign that by June 30th. So it'll have a couple weeks to get that done before the budget gets in. So I'm sure we'll continue to see some back and forth on that over the next week or two. Next slide, please. And then just to touch on Prop 4, this was the climate bond implementation of it. We're still kind of waiting to see how Prop 4 will be utilized, how it will be rolled out over the next few years, how it will help fund some of the state programs. There's been talk about the governor taking some of the budget stuff out of the general fund and utilizing Prop 4 to fund some of those things instead. And so there's been a little bit of information that's trickled out so far. It's something that we're continuing to track, but there's been some accelerations utilizing Prop 4 funding for Department of Water Resources, for wildfire and forest resiliency, which is obviously a big priority issue for the state right now, for land use, climate adaptation, Salton Sea Conservancy, and the California Conservation Corps. We'll continue to bring information to this committee about that and how Prop 4 evolves and how that funding will kind of flow through to local governments in And then just something to mention on the Senate leadership. So currently the Senate Pro Tem is Mike McGuire, a Democrat from Northern California. He actually terms out next year in 2026. And he's had a pretty brief term because Tony Atkins, the former senator, was the Pro Tem before he was there a while. So he's terming out next year. And so they have not wasted any time in kind of transitioning to the next pro tem. And on the right there, you can see Senator Monique Limon. She was elected as the Senate President Pro Tem designee. So she's been identified as who they want to be in the leadership next year, starting next year, and they'll start to transition toward that in 2026. From what we've been told, it was kind of between Senator Limon and Senator Lena Gonzalez from Long Beach. However, Senator Limon had the votes to get the nod, and so that'll take place next year. And I'll move now into the state bill report update. So just report on some of the bills that we've been tracking. I put some of the bills that are still active on the top. So just to kind of go through the list here. So AB 523 by Senate Member Irwin. This is the Metropolitan Water District bill that would authorize proxy votes for member agencies with only one representative. This bill would sunset in 2030. There's been some amendments so that it could only be utilized for 6 board meetings per year. It also would not confer any officer status. So if you were in an officer position on one of the committees or the board, it wouldn't give your proxy that officer, ship status. Metropolitan Water District, as you probably remember, has not taken a position on the bill. It did pass the assembly on a 70-4 vote, with all 4 no votes being from Republicans. There is a hearing, which will take place later this week on the 18th in the Senate Local Government. So that's the next policy committee that it'll be in, sponsored, as you might recall, by Eastern Municipal Water District, and it has support from Aqua, IEUA, Western, and a few others. And there's no opposition currently on file for that bill. The next bill is AB 532. And this is a bill that would authorize public urban water retailers to provide water rate assistance programs to their constituents. West Basin has a support position on this bill, as do many of the water industry kind of partners that we have. There's no opposition on file. It did pass the assembly on a 78-0 unanimous vote, and it's in the Senate without a committee referral as of yet. SB 724 by Senator Richardson, who's part of our delegation. This would require the owner, so it got amended recently to require the owner of a public housing unit to provide information to residents of the unit regarding any existing programs that offers free lead testing. It passed the Senate on a 38-0 vote. There's no support or opposition currently on file, and it's set to be heard in the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials tomorrow. The next is AB 259 by Assemblymember Rubio. This would extend the alternative teleconferencing procedures set by AB 2449 from a couple years back until January of 2030. West Basin does have a support position on this bill. It passed the Assembly on a 73-0 vote. It's set to be heard in the Senate Local Government Committee on July 2nd. And there's very broad support for this, no opposition on file, so expect this to move forward in the Senate. SB 72 by Senator Caballero. This relates to the California Water Plan. It would revise that plan and incorporate future water supply planning targets into the plan. West Basin does have a support position on this. Passed the Senate on a 37-0 unanimous vote, and it's been referred to the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee with no hearing date set as of yet. SB 31 is the next one from Senator McNerney. This relates to recycled water. It would implement new policies to encourage broader use of recycled water throughout the state of California. This has West Basin support, water reuse support, pretty broad support from the water recycling community. It also passed the Senate on a 38-0 vote and will be heard in Assembly Water Parks Wildlife tomorrow. AB 580 is a bill for Metropolitan. It would extend until 2051, so 25 plus years. Certain provisions that Metropolitan utilizes as part of its Colorado River dredging activities. West Basin supports this bill. There's no opposition on file. It passed the Senate unanimously, the Assembly unanimously, and it's been referred to the Senate Natural Resources and Water Committee with no hearing date yet. And then SB 601 by our own Senator Allen, relating to water and waste discharge. This bill is still active. It did somewhat of a more contentious bill. It did pass on a more narrow margin of 23-12 in the Senate. And it has been, it's in the Assembly now, but it has not been referred to any specific committee as of yet. Again, there's been a lot of water industry concern with this bill, so we're going to continue to see those issues kind of play out as it moves into the second house. And then just a couple of bills that did fail that we've been tracking closely. SB 350 was another kind of alternative water rate assistance program. It was more prescriptive in nature to water agencies. It didn't have a funding source identified. And so there was some concern and opposition with that bill. That one did fail at this time. And then AB 794, which relates to PFAS and allowing the State Water Board to enact emergency regulations to establish PFAS water quality standards. Again, another bill that was of concern to the water industry at large. That bill also failed for the time being. All right. That concludes my state report. I'm happy to move on to the federal unless there's any questions on the state stuff.
Okay, Matt, Don, any questions directed here? I don't think so, Matt. So can you go on? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Gray. All right, I'll move to the federal update. So the first is, the first slide I'll touch on relates to kind of the big federal spending bill. You might have been hearing it in the news, called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This bill did pass the House on May 22nd, so it's currently under consideration in the Senate. It has significant impacts on healthcare, on the national deficit, taxes. It's received a lot of criticism from the Department of Government Efficiency. And so it's really kind of going back and forth right now, playing out right now in Washington. President Trump has said that he wanted to get this bill signed by July 4th. But it's more likely that the House and the Senate will not be able to get that done by that timeline. And so there'll be additional negotiations in July, kind of prior to their summer recess. They will want to get it done then because we are kind of fast approaching the federal debt limit. So they would need to enact this bill so that they can raise the debt limit, which could be reached as early as August. Just an update on the Colorado River. There was some recent remarks made at a conference by a Department of the Interior official, and he has expressed, I think, his expectation that the 7 Colorado River states will come to some kind of consensus and be able to come up with a long-term agreement by spring of 2026, which is really going to be needed. And if that doesn't happen, then again, he kind of referenced the possibility of having the federal government intervene into the process if those negotiations are to fail. He did say that the federal government, the DOI, USBR are meeting with the states on a regular basis. And the reason that the timing is so kind of swift here is that a number of agreements that are covering the river are set to expire next year. He even mentioned that the law of the river, which has been around for a long time, could be updated or modified. Those new agreements must be in place by about 15 months or so from now, on October 1st of next year. And before that happens, the draft environmental impact statement is expected to be out in late this year, with the final EIR going into effect in spring 2026. So again, it's an issue that we're tracking. Obviously, Metropolitan Water District is very involved in this, but they have about a year to kind of get things in order and move that forward. Next slide, please. Also wanted to touch on just kind of the clean and drinking water state revolving funds. This is a source of funding that West Basin utilizes, both loans and grants to fund some of our capital improvement projects. So the EPA has said that it plans to expand some of the state revolving fund programs that pay for water infrastructure using some unspecified funding sources. However, it seems to be somewhat in conflict with what the Trump administration has said are plans to cut state revolving fund funding of about $2.5 billion in the 2026 EPA budget request from the White House. This would take funding for the drinking water revolving fund from $1 billion down to $150 million, and $1.6 billion for the clean water down to $155 million. So there's some discrepancy there. There's some conflict in what the different sources are saying. And so this is obviously kind of impacting the water industry at large, who relies on these programs. And so it's something that we're all going to continue tracking. And I'm hoping that I'll get some more information from our federal lobbyist, BSA, that I can present to you next month or the one after, based on where these conversations are headed. And then just kind of some good news in that the EPA has kind of reconfirmed that it believes in the polluters pay policy, which we talked about a little bit earlier as part of those bills that I brought to you for PFAS specifically. It wants to see PFAS eliminated, contamination eliminated throughout the country by holding polluters accountable, not utilities. And then there was kind of a reaffirmation by the administrator of the EPA to rescind some of those MCLs that I talked about last month, and to extend the compliance timeline for kind of the main PFAS, the PFOA and PFAS. And so Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, continues to be very adamant that water systems are passive receivers of PFAS, which costly burden to communities throughout the U.S. So while no specific plans have been unveiled as of yet, it's something that I know that BSA is tracking closely for us. Continue to bring information to you. And then finally, the last slide that I have for you relates to the U.S. Army Corps funding. This is something that was just brought to my attention last week when the BSA report was sent over. So it's something that I want to follow up on and get more information for this committee and the board. But there's some concern over the Army Corps' 2025 work plans for construction funding. This year, 2/3 of the funding is proposed to go to what they're calling red states versus, which is usually a 50-50 split between red and blue states. And California's expected Army Corps construction funding was reduced from 125 million in 2025 to 0. That's something that I'm asking for some kind of confirmation from BSA to see what exactly that means, to see if it could impact us in the future if we ever need to ask for more funds again. And so it's really just showing a shifting of funds from California and Washington, which gets a lot of Army Corps funding, to some of the red states. And so again, this is just an issue that just came up. I saw it for the first time last week, and I will continue to get more information for you that I can present next month. If not in the meantime, we'll send something out if we get information sooner. Okay, with that concludes my legislative update, and I'm happy to take any final questions from the committee.
All right, thank you, Matt. Is there anyone that has questions directed there, or anyone?
The report, Matt, I have no questions. Thank you.
I thank you, Director Deere. Yes, very thorough report, Matt. I don't have any questions either, but thank you so much for the report. Okay, item 6, information calendar. Mr. General Manager, please introduce those items.
Yes, Madam Chair, this is our last information item. It's item 6B. It's our monthly Metropolitan Water District update. And for the presentation, we have Tammy Hurley-High, our Senior Water Policy and Resources Analyst.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Gray and Member Deere. Happy to provide an update for you today. So this report summarizes updates on the recent board discussions at Metropolitan. The information begins on page 73 of the committee packet. It's important to note that Metropolitan canceled their regularly scheduled board and committee meetings earlier this month due to that activity in downtown Los Angeles, which happened just about 1 block away from their headquarters building. However, these meetings have been rescheduled. So a special board meeting and organization personnel and effectiveness committee was held last Friday. And then the remainder of the committee meetings and a special board meeting will be held on Tuesday, June 24th. So today's report includes a brief update on a few items that include the business model refinements, cost drivers to the next biannual budget planning, golden mussels in the Bay Delta, status on the lawsuit settlement with Metropolitan and the San Diego County Water Authority, and an update on the recruitment process for the general manager. So there are PowerPoint slides that begin on page 90 of the committee packet to help guide updates on this report. Thank you, Desiree. So first off is the potential business model refinement options. So since July last year in 2024, an ad hoc working group composed of the general managers of Metropolitan 26 member agencies and Metropolitan board directors have been meeting to review potential refinement to the business model. So from that effort, there are 3 sub-working groups that have been formed. They include the finance sub-working group, the water resources, and engineering sub-working group. So today, I'll provide an update on items only pertaining to the finance sub-working group that they have been reviewing. So there are 4 areas that have been determined to be the most relevant to enhance Metropolitan's long-term financial stability. And these include the treated water cost recovery, unrestricted reserve policy, conservative water demand projections, and other fixed revenues. So an expanded set of alternatives for the charges related to the treatment charges, the peaking and the treatment standby have been reviewed. And these include a member agency proposed alternatives. So this slide shows 2 proposals as a result of many months of meetings to review the details in the rate structure. So one proposal under option 1 that you can see here, they would recover approximately 30% of Metropolitan treatment revenues through a fixed charge. So these are fixed costs associated with the standby charge and the peaking capacity charge. The peaking charge would be based on an annual peak day billing, and this is under option 1. So this particular option is supported by the majority of the member agency managers. The second alternative proposal follows the same overall general structure, but instead of using the annual peak day, this option will use a summer peak day as the basis for the peaking billing component. This option has less support from member agencies. It's also important to note that Rockelis Financial Consultants, who is Metropolitan's independent rate consultant, was also involved throughout this evaluation process, and they have provided technical input. Rockelis has conducted an independent assessment of the 2 proposals and agree that both reflect a reasonable balance between the cost recovery principles. And they are consistent with Metropolitan cost of service principles. Therefore, either option would help align the member agency treatment rates and provide enhancement in the rate stability and predictability. So the next Finance Affordability, Asset Management, and Efficiency Committee is scheduled for Monday, June 23rd. Tuesday. And so in July, next month, Metropolitan staff will bring more information to the board to consider approving a treated water cost recovery rate structure that would be included in the next biennium budget. So that's the update on that item. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So potential cost drivers for the next biennial budget. Last month, Metropolitan staff presented an overview of potential cost drivers for the next biannual budget to their Finance, Affordability, Asset Management, and Efficiency Committee. It's important to note that this was initial information that was provided to the Finance Committee for their review and to provide feedback to Metropolitan staff. What is also happening in parallel is the review and discussion around potential business model refinements, which will play an important part in the biannual budget planning. So this slide lists the items identified as potential challenges and cost drivers for the next budget cycle, in addition to the 10-year financial forecast. And these include additional CIP expenditures, possible new major capital projects, funding zero emission vehicles, staffing challenges, and other potential drivers that may play into the mix. So Metropolitan staff will continue to bring this item back to the Finance Committee throughout the coming months. And it will include updated cost estimates as the budget continues to be developed. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so golden mussels in the Delta. So last year in October 2024, golden mussels were first discovered in the Bay Delta. And then shortly after that, in December, the California Department of Fish and Game Commission took an emergency action to add golden mussels to the restricted animals list for the purpose of possession or transportation of this mussel species. So golden mussels have not been found in any of Metropolitan's sources of supply. However, if the golden mussels were to be discovered in the future, Metropolitan could be in violation of the new rule established by the Department of Fish and Game as part of Metropolitan's export operations. Similarly, there are concerns with quagga and zebra mussels, which are also listed as restricted animals. However, in those cases, Metropolitan secured authority already through legislation to receive protection from any regulatory enforcement against their water operation, as long as they are operating under an approved mussel control plan through the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Now that the golden mussel issue has emerged, Metropolitan will need similar protection against regulatory enforcement. And Metropolitan is now working with a coalition of other water agencies, including the State Water Contractors, the Association of California Water Agencies, and the Northern California Water Association to seek legislative authority to be protected from regulatory liability if Metropolitan is operating under an approved mussel control plan. In addition, this coalition will also be pursuing a $10 million in the Proposition 4 funding for the Department of Water Resources for golden mussel control in the State Water Project system. Oh, next slide, please. So next item is the update on a settlement agreement with the San Diego County Water Authority and the Metropolitan Water District. So they've been celebrating this. It's been a big achievement, a big milestone. They put out a press release recently. So there's been a lot of discussions, as you know. So they have settled their longstanding litigation, which include cases that were filed back in 2014, 2016, and 2018. The settlement consists of a comprehensive settlement agreement and an amended and restated exchange agreement between the parties. It creates a new version of the agreement. Importantly, the exchange agreement's price term has been changed to a fixed amount with a neutral escalator, as opposed to one that was tied to Metropolitan's rates. And that price term that used to be tied to Metropolitan's rates was the primary source of the dispute. So this slide shows a few highlights of that settlement. All pending appeals are dismissed. All previous final judicial decisions remain in place. San Diego is to pay Metropolitan an agreed upon fixed price for delivery of exchange water instead of the past price based on Metropolitan's rate structure. San Diego to pay Metropolitan a fixed payment for water each year, rather than just making payments based on the volume of the water exchanged. This will provide San Diego with a potential source of new revenue. And then lastly, every 5 years, Metropolitan and San Diego Water Authority will meet to review implementation of the exchange agreement. Next slide, please. The next item is the recruitment process for the general manager. So earlier this year in March, Metropolitan, their board approved an employment contract with Mr. Devin Apatahe to serve the role as general manager and authorized retroactive payment of the approved salary to January 29, 2025. So that employment agreement commenced January 29, 2025. It is to continue until December 31st, 2025. So in anticipation of the general manager's term ending in the coming months, the board had authorized an ad hoc committee to begin vetting various recruiting forms and to authorize the committee of the Organization Personnel and Effectiveness Committee, referred to OPE, to hire the selected firm to participate in a meeting with the board in June regarding the recruitment of the new general manager. So last month in May, the general manager selection process was presented at a special joint meeting of the board of directors and the executive committee members. Last Friday, there was a committee meeting and a report on firms selected for the recruitment was presented. In addition, the board reviewed the general manager's job description, the operating agreement, and general manager's priorities and qualities. So this slide shows the process and the timeline. And you can see here everything I pretty much described. And then moving forward, looking ahead, August and September, the board selects and appoints a general manager. That's an updated slide that came from the last meeting. So they are anticipating to have everything settled by September. They are hoping to have a new general manager in place by October. And then that way, that would give them an opportunity to work alongside Mr. Devin Apatahe as he nears his term. Can you go to the next slide, please? Desiree. So lastly, this is the water supply update for the conditions. And so these graphs, as you know, the top green shaded area is the State Water Project, and I'll start there. So the Northern California precipitation was approximately average this water year. The reservoir storage is at 119% of historical average. And this healthy storage amount has resulted in the increase to the State Water Project allocation from DWR, which is now 50% of the requested supplies. For conditions along the Colorado River, in the middle portion of the blue shaded area, Lake Powell's elevation is 3,559 feet, which is 33% capacity. Lake Mead's elevation is 1,056 feet, which is 31% capacity. And the total Colorado River system storage is 1.47 million acre feet, less compared to this time last year. So this is showing a deficit in storage, which has been growing in the past couple of months. Although the Colorado River Basin snowpack has peaked near average, the snow has melted off early. The spring precipitation has been limited, which therefore results in dwindling runoff projections. So the forecasted inflow to Lake Powell has been steadily declining due to poor precipitation and conditions throughout the Colorado River Basin. Metropolitan's estimated Colorado River supply for this year, 2025, is approximately 833,000 acre feet. And then adding to that, approximately 957,000 acre feet of State Water Project supply from the 50% allocation. So in conclusion, Metropolitan's total supply estimate is 1.79 million acre feet. And Metropolitan's demands are projected to be approximately 1.59 million acre feet for the calendar year. So therefore, they are projecting a surplus of about 205,000 acre feet of water supply for member agency. So that wraps up my report, and I'll conclude there. And please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy, for that very thorough report. Director Dare, any questions?
No questions.
All right, Tammy, all of you guys have given very thorough reports. I don't have any questions either. So, are we on item 7? Does that complete 6, Mr. General Manager?
That is correct, Madam Chair, though we do not have any closed session items today.
All right, item 8, Director's comments and future agenda items. Director Dare, any comments or future agenda items?
No, not now.
All right, thank you. And my comments, thank you to staff for those very, very thorough reports. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. General Manager. And I don't have any future agenda items. Ms. General Manager, do you have any comments?
No, just want to say thank you to staff for the reports.
All right, thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.